The fluorescent lights of my corner office hummed with a familiar, sterile monotony. From the 22nd floor, the glittering grid of Los Angeles sprawled into the endless night, a view that had once felt like a trophy but now felt like a very pretty cage. I, Evelyn Carter, at 42, had everything my younger self had dreamed of: the CEO title at Aura Strategies, a sleek modern apartment in Silver Lake, a successful husband, Mark, who was a respected cardiologist. And yet, the silence in my penthouse was deafening. My conversations with Mark a series of polite exchanges about market trends and hospital politics. Our love had become a well-managed, low-yield portfolio. Enter Lucas Miller. He was hired as my executive assistant 6 months ago, a recommendation from the board. At 28, he was all sharp angles and quiet intensity. His resume from Stanford was impeccable, but it was his demeanor that struck me, a calm, unflappable competence that seemed to settle the chaotic energy of the firm simply by him entering a room. He had this way of listening, his green eyes focused, making you feel you were the only person who had ever had a thought worth hearing. He anticipated needs I didn't know I had, replacing my standing espresso with a chamomile tea during a tense afternoon, having the correct files ready before I asked, his knuckles brushing mine as he handed them over, sending a jolt I steadfastly ignored. The attraction was a forbidden current, one I refused to acknowledge. He was my employee. I was his boss. I was married. It was ludicrous. I buried myself deeper in work, in charity galas with Mark, in the meticulously curated performance of my perfect life. The catalyst was the Viridian account, a make-or-break deal that had me working late for 2 weeks straight. Mark, as usual, was at the hospital, on call. It was past 9 p.m. on a Thursday when the final presentation was complete. The office was a tomb, save for the two of us. I was leaning against my desk, exhaustion melting my bones. "It's perfect, Evelyn," Lucas said, his voice softer than usual in the quiet. He stood before me, the finished bound proposal in his hands. "They'll sign." "You've outdone yourself." "We've outdone ourselves," I corrected, offering a tired smile. "I couldn't have done this without you, Lucas." Truly. He didn't step back. The space between us, usually so professionally maintained, seemed to shrink. The air grew thick, charged. I could see the faint dusting of stubble along his jaw, the slight pulse in his throat. "You look exhausted," he murmured, not with pity but with a genuine care that felt like a warm blanket. "You carry the weight of this entire place. Doesn't anyone ever take care of you?" The question, so simple, so direct, shattered something inside me. It was the key turning in a lock I'd kept sealed for years. Tears, hot and humiliating, pricked my eyes. I looked away, toward the city lights. "I'm fine," I whispered, the lie brittle. "Evelyn." He said my name, my first name, not M's. "Carter." It was a caress, a challenge. When I looked back, his gaze held mine. There was no mistaking the heat in it, the raw admiration that had long since bled past professional respect. Every alarm in my mind blared. Infidelity, unprofessional, wrong. But my body, starved for a connection that was more than transactional, didn't move. The silence stretched, a taut wire. Then, he did it. Slowly, giving me every chance to stop him, he raised a hand and brushed a straight hair from my cheek with his thumb. The touch was electric, a lightning strike of sensation in my numb world. I should have stepped back. I should have fired him on the spot. Instead, I let out a shaky breath I didn't know I was holding. It was all the permission he needed. His lips met mine, and it was not a tentative exploration. It was a claiming, a confession, a release of months of pent-up tension. The proposal binder thudded softly on the plush carpet. My hands, as if of their own volition, fisted in the crisp cotton of his shirt, pulling him closer. His kiss was everything my life wasn't: urgent, passionate, deeply present. The taste of him, of coffee and mint and something uniquely Lucas, overwhelmed me. This was no peck on the cheek. This was a beautiful, terrible freefall. When we broke apart, we were both breathing heavily. His forehead rested against mine. "Tell me to stop," he breathed, his voice ragged. "Tell me to leave, and I will. I'll resign tomorrow. But if you don't." I didn't tell him to stop. I kissed him again, my fingers sliding into his dark hair. In that moment, every principle, every vow, every fear was incinerated in the sheer, blinding need he ignited in me. He walked me backward until my legs hit the edge of my polished mahogany desk. His hands, those capable, efficient hands that typed memos and organized schedules, came up to cradle my face with a devastating tenderness. Then they trailed down, over the collar of my tailored blazer, finding the first button of my silk blouse. "Let me," he whispered against my lips, a question and a statement. A war raged inside me. The ghost of Mark's distant smile. The image of our wedding photo on my desk, now tilted away from this scene. The cold horror of what I was doing. But louder than all of it was the screaming need to feel wanted, not as a CEO, not as a donor's wife, but as a woman. I gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. My eyes locked on his. His fingers worked the first button open, then the next, his movements agonizingly slow. Each brush of his knuckles against my skin was a brand. The blouse fell open. The cool office air hit my skin, followed by the heat of his palms spanning my waist. He pushed the blazer off my shoulders, letting it fall to the floor beside the forgotten proposal. His lips followed the path his hands had taken, kissing my collarbone, the hollow of my throat, murmuring words that were too raw, too intimate to repeat, praises not for my business acumen, but for my skin, my scent, the sound of my breath catching. He undressed me there, in the heart of my empire, with a reverence that felt like worship. The desk, once a symbol of my authority, became an altar to my transgression. And when there was nothing left between us, when he lifted me onto the cold mahogany, I didn't think of the tomorrow. I didn't think of the consequences. I lost myself in the sensation of being truly, wildly, and ruinously seen. Afterward, lying in the disarray of our clothes on the office floor, wrapped in his arms, the guilt descended like a shroud. It was cold and heavy. I began to tremble. I'm a terrible person, I said, the words hollow in the dark. He pulled me closer, his chin resting on my head. This doesn't feel terrible, he said quietly. It feels like the only real thing that's happened in a long time. And that was the cruelest truth of all. Thus began the double life. Lucas became my secret, my addiction. Our affair was conducted in stolen moments, late nights at the office, business lunches at discreet hotels downtown, desperate, hungry encounters in his apartment in Venice Beach, which smelled of salt air and him. He was a drug. With him, I was alive, laughing, arguing about art, making love with a passion that left me breathless. With Mark, I was a beautifully dressed ghost, going through the motions, my mind always elsewhere, tainted with guilt and a terrifying, burgeoning happiness. The lies piled up. The fake conference in San Francisco where I spent 3 days tangled in sheets with Lucas. The emergency work calls I took in the garden, whispering promises I had no right to make. I became an expert deceiver, but the weight of it was crushing my soul. The vibrant, confident CEO began to make uncharacteristic errors. I forgot meetings. I snapped at junior staff. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Mark noticed. Of course he did. The distance between us, once a quiet chasm, became a gaping void. One evening, over a silent dinner, he put down his fork. Evelyn, who is he? The question was calm, devoid of anger. It was the calm of a surgeon stating a clinical fact. It chilled me to my core. What? Who? I managed, the salmon turning to ash in my mouth. Don't, he said, his eyes, kind, tired eyes I once loved, seeing right through me. I'm not a fool. You're here, but you're not. You haven't been for months. Is it someone at the firm? The confession didn't come in a torrent. It came out dry, brittle. I didn't give him a name, but I didn't deny it. I watched the life drain from his face, replaced by a profound, weary hurt. He didn't yell. He just stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the city we'd built our life around. I'll stay at the club tonight, he said finally. We'll figure out the rest. The fallout was a quiet, brutal earthquake. When I told Lucas, desperate for the solace of his arms, his reaction was not what I expected. His face, usually so open with me, shuttered. So he knows, Lucas said, pacing the small living room of his apartment. What does that mean for us, Evelyn? Now that it's out, I don't know, I wept. My life is falling apart. Our life, he corrected, stopping to kneel before me. Let me be your life now. Leave him. Be with me, fully. It was the demand I'd both craved and feared. In the secret world of our affair, it was easy to fantasize. Faced with the stark reality, divorce, scandal, the end of my marriage, I froze. I loved Lucas, with a ferocity that scared me. But I had loved Mark, too. I had built a life, a history. The thought of publicly dismantling it, of becoming the subject of whispers at the country club and in the boardroom, was paralyzing. I asked for time. Lucas gave it, but a new tension crept in. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. He was no longer my obedient assistant, and I was no longer his untouchable boss. We were two people clinging to a life raft in a storm, and I was unsure if I wanted to be saved. The final unraveling came at the company's annual gala, an event I had once shared with Mark at my side. This year, he was absent. Lucas, promoted now to a junior partner, a move that raised eyebrows, though I justified it with his work on Viridian, was there. We moved through the crowd like strangers, the space between us a live wire. I could feel his eyes on me all night, a possessive, heated gaze that once thrilled me but now felt like a cage. He cornered me on the deserted terrace, under a blanket of stars. "You look incredible," he said, his hand brushing the small of my back. Mine. The word jarred me. "Lucas, not here." "Where, then?" he pressed, his voice low. "Your empty apartment." "My place." "When do we stop hiding, Evelyn? I want the world to know you're mine." The possessiveness, which had once felt like passion, now felt like a chain. I looked at him, this beautiful, brilliant young man who had awakened me, and I saw the future, a future where I would always be the woman who left her husband for her assistant, where this sin would define us. The guilt toward Mark was corrosive, but so was the fear of losing myself completely in Lucas's shadow. "I can't breathe," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He mistook it for passion, leaning in to kiss me. I turned my head, his lips grazing my cheek. He pulled back as if burned. In his eyes, I saw the dawning realization, and then, a flash of the cold ambition I'd glimpsed in the boardroom. "You're going back to him," he stated, his voice flat. "I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted, the truth finally breaking free. Us, it started in fire, Lucas. But fire consumes everything. I have nothing left of myself. I gave you everything," he snapped, the careful control shattering. "I gave up my professionalism, my integrity for you. I waited in the shadows. And now you're choosing the empty shell of a life over something real." The words hung between us, ugly and true. He had given up things, too. But his everything felt like a demand, while mine felt like a surrender. We stood there, two people who had set their world on fire for a moment of warmth, now facing the ashes. There was no dramatic scene, just a terrible, quiet understanding that the fantasy was over. I resigned from Aura's strategies the following week. The official reason was to pursue new opportunities and focus on personal matters. The board, blessedly, asked no questions. The divorce from Mark was civil, a severance of assets with a profound and unspoken sadness. He was too kind to destroy me publicly, and his decency made my guilt all the heavier. I never saw Lucas again after the gala. He accepted a position with a rival firm in New York. Sometimes, in the deep silence of my new, smaller apartment, I allow myself to remember the heat of his touch, the way he made me feel resurrected. But I also remember the cost. The story I'm sharing isn't a celebration of forbidden love. It's a cautionary tale. It's about the emptiness that can fester in a life that looks perfect from the outside, and the dangerous, destructive places we sometimes go to fill it. I hurt two good men. I betrayed vows and trust. I confused a powerful, illicit attraction for love, and in doing so, nearly destroyed the person I'd worked so hard to become. The title is provocative, I know. He was my assistant, until I let him undress me in the office. It's true, but